Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I've always been drawn to intense relationships. There's something about that fire, the passion, the all-consuming energy. But everything changed when I met Kara. At first, she was sweet. Really sweet. Her laugh had this carefree ring to it that made me smile without even trying. She messaged me constantly, little jokes, updates, good morning texts, and she always checked in, asking if I'd eaten, if I'd made it home okay, if I was feeling all right. It felt like being wrapped in a warm blanket, I thought. This is what it's supposed to feel like. But over time, that warmth became smothering. The constant attention turned into constant surveillance. If I told her I was out with friends, she'd insist on coming too. If I was late replying, even by a minute, she would call over and over again, 10 times in a row sometimes. It felt like she was always there, even when she wasn't. Like her shadow followed me everywhere. I lost count of the times I sat in my car or my room, just trying to catch my breath, feeling completely overwhelmed. Eventually, I knew I had to end it. I promised myself I'd be firm this time. No backing down, no second chances. I couldn't keep living like I was on a leash, constantly monitored and controlled. I was done. But the breakup? It was a disaster. Kara didn't just cry, she screamed. She shouted so loud it felt like the walls were shaking. She accused me of everything, of cheating, of lying, of leading her on. I tried to stay calm, to explain that there wasn't anyone else, that I just couldn't handle the jealousy, the control anymore. But she wasn't hearing any of it. "Stop doing this to me," she shrieked, her voice cracking between fury and heartbreak. I thought maybe she'd calm down after I left. I was wrong. I packed a bag and moved out of the apartment we'd shared. For the first time in months I could breathe, or at least I thought I could. Then I started seeing her in places she'd never gone before. Parked across from my office, standing across the street from the gym, just watching, always watching. One night I heard footsteps in the alley next to my building. I froze, heart pounding, and peeked through the blinds. Nothing, just shadows. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I was. I tried to ignore the constant calls and texts, turned my phone on silent, convinced myself that if I didn't engage, she'd eventually stop. But Kara wasn't the kind of person who let go easily. It was so messed up. I'd broken up with her because I felt suffocated. But now I felt even more stalked, even more trapped. That weekend I made a choice. I needed normalcy. So I went out with some friends to a bar restaurant just outside the city. Good food, laid-back crowd. For a few hours I actually felt okay. We laughed, ate, drank. I felt almost like myself again. Eventually my friends left, and I stayed for one last drink. That's when this girl, really pretty, confident smile, walked up to me. We hit it off instantly. The conversation was easy, the connection surprising. Before she left, I asked for her number. She gave it to me without hesitation. I was walking to the parking lot, her number glowing on my screen, still smiling to myself when I saw my car. Something was off. I couldn't place it right away. Then I got closer, and she jumped out from behind it. Kara. My heart dropped, and then I saw them, my tires, all 4 slashed clean through. She stood there, breathing hard, eyes wild, holding a small knife like it was an extension of her hand. "What the hell, Kara?" I said, stunned, my hands rising instinctively to my head. "What are you doing?" "Who is she?" Kara screamed, pointing at the phone still in my hand. "Is she why you left me, you bastard?" "What are you even talking about?" I shouted back. "Why are you here? Why are you doing this? Just leave me alone." Her face twisted, and something snapped in her eyes. She let out this raw, animalistic scream, nothing human about it, and then she ran at me, knife raised like she meant to plunge it straight into my chest. I barely had time to think. My body just reacted, I turned and bolted. She chased me through the entire parking lot, yelling, swearing, promising she'd kill me. I could hear her footsteps right behind me, her breath ragged with rage. I could have tried to stop her, maybe even restrained her. But that knife, and that look in her eyes, I didn't want either of us to get hurt. I didn't want to risk it. So I ran, faster than I ever had before, leaving her behind in the darkness. After running several meters through the parking lot, my breath ragged and my legs burning, I dared to glance behind me, and to my shock, she was gone. Vanished. It was like she had frozen mid-chase or melted into the shadows. My chest heaved as I slowed to a halt, scanning every corner of the lot, half expecting her to lunge at me again. But there was nothing, just the eerie silence of a late night gone wrong. With my heart still hammering in my chest, I cautiously walked back toward my car. Maybe she had finally left. Maybe she'd come to her senses. But as I approached, I felt my stomach twist. Not only were all 4 tires slashed, but deep, erratic scratches ran across the paint of the driver's side. Dozens of them, like a desperate message carved in fury. I clenched my jaw, seething. I called a friend, thankfully, one of the few people I still trusted. He came without asking too many questions, and together we changed the tires. It took nearly 2 hours. By the time I finally got into the driver's seat, my body ached with exhaustion and tension. I just wanted to go home, shower off the madness, and pretend this night hadn't happened. The streets were almost unnaturally quiet as I drove. No headlights behind me, no cars coming the other way. Just empty roads and the soft hum of the engine. But my mind wouldn't settle. I kept replaying everything. Her scream, the knife, her sudden disappearance. What the hell was she doing hiding in a parking lot with a weapon? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, jaw clenched. I felt like I was crawling through a spider's web. Her web. Every time I thought I'd escaped, she pulled me back in. Then a soft thud from the back seat snapped me out of my thoughts. I flinched, instinctively checking the rearview mirror. Nothing. But then, I felt it. Something cold and sharp brushing the side of my neck. My heart stopped. I whipped my head around, and there she was. Kara. Rising slowly from the back seat, eyes wide and unblinking, that same knife in her hand. Her lips curled into a smile. Not warm, not sad, just cold. Detached. It was the kind of smile that didn't belong on a human face. I panicked, jerking the steering wheel. The tires screeched against the pavement as the car swerved violently. Kara shouted something, her voice shrill and distorted, but I couldn't understand the words. My brain couldn't process it. She was in the car the entire time. I had left it unlocked during the first confrontation, hadn't even thought to check. The car lurched again. In desperation, I reached back, trying to grab her wrist, trying to get the knife away. She slashed at me, wild and relentless. We struggled. Me half-turned in the driver's seat, her lunging from the back, hands flailing, fingers clawing, metal flashing. Then, impact. The car slammed into a pole. I remember the metal crumpling, the windshield shattering like ice, and the brutal jolt as everything turned black. When I opened my eyes, flashing red and blue lights painted the night sky. Ambulance sirens wailed nearby. Police officers barked instructions. My body felt like it had been put through a grinder, aching, bruised, every nerve screaming. My vision swam in and out of focus. I heard someone say I wasn't seriously injured, but I couldn't focus on that. I was trying to understand what had happened. Had she been thrown from the car? Was she still here? Then I heard one of the officers talking to someone nearby. A witness. They claimed they saw a woman limping away from the wreckage, refusing help. She looked injured, they said, but hostile. No one could get near her. Later, a pair of officers came to my hospital room to take my statement. I told them everything, from the weeks of Kara's stalking to the knife, the ambush, the crash. They listened. At least I think they did. But something in their expressions felt off, detached. "We're on it," one officer assured me. but his voice lacked conviction. It was just something he had to say. Days passed, then weeks. No word from Kara. The security footage from the parking lot, blurry, unusable. My phone, destroyed in the crash. They managed to recover fragments of video and messages, but not enough. When they went to her apartment, it was empty. No one knew where she'd gone. She had simply disappeared. Eventually, I tried to piece my life back together, moved to a new place, bought a new car, changed my routine, tried to scrub her from my mind like a stain I could wash out. But the feeling never left. That quiet, creeping sensation that I'm being watched. Every time I step outside, I feel eyes on me. Every time I'm in a crowd, I scan faces, convinced hers will be there, just out of reach. That chill never goes away. She could be anywhere, waiting. And though I try to convince myself it's over, that I'm free, I know it's a lie. I still wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced she's just behind the door. I hesitate before trusting anyone, second-guess every moment of peace, because deep down, I know the truth. Kara's shadow is still with me, and it always will be. My friend Lorena had this grand idea. She swore by it. She and her boyfriend Daniel had met on a dating app, and now she was convinced I'd find my soulmate the same way. Honestly, the thought of meeting a complete stranger in person made my stomach twist. I'm naturally shy, and going out with someone I hadn't even spoken to before felt like walking blindfolded into traffic. But Lorena and Daniel kept insisting. They wanted to set me up with Daniel's friend, Juan. After days of pressure, I finally gave in. A few days later, as the date crept closer, Lorena called me, her voice buzzing with excitement. She was gushing about the apartment Daniel had rented for the holidays. "It's so cute. You'd love the view," while I quietly tried to calm the swarm of nerves in my stomach. It felt strange not having her by my side, especially now when I really needed someone to talk me down. She was always the one steadying me, especially in situations like this. I didn't know much about Juan aside from a single photo she had shown me. He seemed okay in the picture, clean cut, soft smile, but photos never really tell the whole story. I kept repeating to myself that this was just a date, not a contract. Still, the anxiety sat heavy in my chest. I got ready, carefully picking out an outfit that made me feel safe but not plain, and headed to the meeting spot, Cello Square. It was a place I often visited with Lorena, familiar enough to feel like home turf. When I arrived, I immediately spotted Juan sitting on one of the benches. He was already there, waiting. I hesitated for a moment, my feet frozen in place before slowly walking up and sitting down across from him. "Hi," I said, trying to steady my voice. "It's nice to meet you." He smiled, almost bashfully, but something about the smile didn't reach his eyes. There was a subtle stiffness in the way he moved, a faint delay in how he responded. We sat in silence for a few seconds before we awkwardly started chatting. He was trying, I'll give him that, telling me about his job, his hobbies, but his words felt rehearsed, like he was playing a role. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "You're so beautiful. I'm honestly kind of nervous. I've never gone on a date with someone like you." I blushed. I wanted to believe it was a genuine compliment, but there was something off. His voice was too deliberate. He laughed a bit, then mentioned he was hungry and asked if I wanted to grab dinner somewhere. "Sure," I said quickly, eager to move on from the awkward bench conversation. He led me to his car. It was an older model, but surprisingly clean inside. I settled into the passenger seat and tried to relax. As he drove, he cracked jokes, told me light stories, things that were probably supposed to be charming, but his energy felt mismatched. Too upbeat in one moment, eerily quiet in the next. There were long pauses, and I noticed he wasn't even really looking at the road sometimes, just staring ahead like his mind had wandered far away. Soon the buildings started thinning out. The streets grew darker, quieter. "Hey," "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual despite the tightness growing in my chest. He didn't answer right away. Then, with a rehearsed tone, he said, "I want to show you a special place outside the city. The air's so fresh out there and the stars. God, you can actually see them." My hands started sweating. Something about the way he said it. It wasn't just the words. It was the mechanical way he delivered them, like he'd said them 100 times before. My heart picked up speed. The sky outside had dimmed, and the road ahead stretched into the dark like a ribbon of uncertainty. "Are we still going to eat?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to betray the fear bubbling inside me. He smiled, but this time it didn't feel like a smile at all. His mask was starting to slip. The charming front he'd put on was crumbling, and I could see something darker underneath. My gut screamed at me, this was wrong. "Just relax," he said suddenly. Then, without warning, he pulled out a small spray can with no label. "This'll help calm you down." "What?" I barely got the word out before he sprayed it in my face. I gasped, coughing, my eyes burning. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, but the dizziness hit almost immediately. My head spun, my limbs went heavy, and the edges of my vision warped like heat rising from asphalt. My body wasn't mine anymore. The world blurred into black. When I came to, everything hurt. A deep, pulsing ache spread through my muscles. I tried to move. My wrists were tied, numb from strain. Panic kicked in like a surge of electricity. My head lolled to the side and I saw trees, tall, dense, endless forest. And then I saw her, Lorena. She was lying on the ground a few meters away, barely recognizable. Bruised, bloodied, bound. My stomach dropped. My friend, my only anchor, somehow still alive. I tried to scream her name, but something was stuffed in my mouth, gagging me. I started crying, shaking uncontrollably, desperate to wake up from what had to be a nightmare. Voices broke through the chaos. Juan, Daniel. They were nearby, arguing loudly. I turned toward the sound, and through the shadows I saw them. Juan was yelling, his voice sharp with rage. Daniel, calm, too calm. I couldn't make out everything, but bits of their conversation pierced through the ringing in my ears. She was supposed to be sold. You said she'd be fine. I had to get rid of her, she wouldn't shut up. Lorena. My chest felt like it would implode. My brain struggled to catch up. They were talking about her, like she was nothing, like this was all some twisted transaction. Juan's voice cracked with fury. You killed her? That wasn't the deal. Daniel shrugged, like he was talking about a broken object. My mind reeled, the horror sinking in like freezing water. I wasn't just on a bad date. I wasn't just unlucky. I was prey. And I had no idea how or if I was going to get out. He was panicking, his voice raw and frantic. She wasn't part of the deal. What the hell are we going to do if someone finds us? I froze, my whole body trembling as those words settled in. My heart slammed against my ribs as the horrifying truth clawed its way into my mind. Lorena was gone. Not just gone, betrayed, used, erased. Her life taken like it was nothing, like she was nothing. Bile rose in my throat. I wanted to scream at them, to demand they give her back. I wanted to rage, to tell them they'd pay for what they'd done. But I couldn't speak, not with the gag biting into my mouth, not with terror tightening every muscle in my body. They didn't know I was awake. And now, they were talking about me. We can't just leave her here, tie her up. That's the safest thing for now. One of them muttered. I felt the ropes at my wrists being pulled tighter, every word they said making my breath catch. My pulse thundered in my ears. I knew I had to stay calm. If I panicked now, it was over. My only hope was to wait, to find an opening, to run. My mind screamed at me to cry, to thrash, to scream, but survival held me still. Silent tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and helpless, blurring my vision. And then, I noticed it. The rope. It wasn't as tight as it should have been. Somehow, somewhere, someone had rushed. A flicker of hope sparked inside me. My heart pounded wildly as I tested the tension again. Loose. Not enough to slip free just yet, but it was something. I had to wait for the right moment. Just 1 second, one slip. That's all it would take. The moment came faster than I expected. "We need to move her," Daniel said suddenly. "Get rid of the body before dawn." Lorena. My breath caught in my throat. They were still talking about her like she was nothing. My fists clenched. My wrists throbbed from straining against the rope. I didn't have time to mourn. I had to move. As they turned their backs arguing over what to do, I didn't wait. I ran. I bolted into the night, not daring to look back. Branches whipped at my face, my lungs burned, and the tears streaming down my cheeks blinded me. But I didn't stop. I ran like my life depended on it, because it did. I spotted Juan's car parked crookedly beneath the trees, the driver's side door ajar, the key still in the lock. Adrenaline surged through me. I yanked the door open. It groaned, loud and jarring in the silent woods, but I didn't hesitate. I threw myself inside, fumbling with the gear lever, my fingers slick with sweat. The engine sputtered, then roared to life, headlights flooding the narrow dirt path ahead. I didn't think. I just slammed the accelerator and sped off into the black. They'd know I was gone any second now. The realization lit a fresh blaze of fear in my chest, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get as far away from them as possible. The road twisted through the forest, and the darkness seemed to swallow everything around me. My hands gripped the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. Anger, grief, terror, they churned in my gut, pushing me forward. Eventually, I saw a thick tree off the road, a good enough hiding spot. I pulled off, killed the engine, and let the silence consume me. My chest rose and fell in frantic bursts. I pressed myself low against the seat, listening. A few minutes later, I heard the growl of an engine pass by. Then another, then nothing. They were looking for me, but they didn't see me. Only when the sounds of their search faded into the distance did I exhale. It came out as a sob. I was alive, but Lorena wasn't. And that's when something in me snapped. Something cold, sharp, and unrelenting. This wouldn't end here. They wouldn't walk away from what they did. They'd taken her from me, taken her from this world, and I'd make sure they paid. As the first weak light of dawn began to seep through the trees, I climbed out of the car and ran. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest police station. Hours passed in a blur. Questions, statements, photographs, tears. My voice trembled as I told them everything, every last detail. The officers listened carefully, their expressions darkening with each word. 2 days later, Juan and Daniel were arrested. The charges were staggering: murder, human trafficking, kidnapping, assault. The kind of crimes that turned your stomach and made your skin crawl. But they wouldn't be hurting anyone else. Justice had started. Lorena would never come back. Nothing could fix that. But at least I knew her death wouldn't be in vain. I had survived. I had escaped. And now I was fighting. For her, for myself, and for every other girl who never made it home. Because monsters belong behind bars, and I was going to make damn sure they stayed there. It all started one night when Vivan, my best friend and roommate, was pacing our bedroom, spiraling into one of her meltdowns. She flung herself onto the bed with a dramatic sigh, shouting, "No one's even asked me out for Valentine's Day. Not a single guy." She'd been worrying about this for weeks, obsessing over whether she wasn't attractive anymore. Lately, it had gotten worse. She'd changed her skincare routine twice, dropped way too much money on new clothes, and even brought up the idea of getting a nose job, all because no one at college had noticed her. I sat at the edge of the bed and tried to soothe her. "Vivan, come on. You're gorgeous. Someone amazing will come along. You don't have to change a thing." But she wasn't having it. She pulled her blanket over her head and snapped, "You don't get it. You have a boyfriend. You have no idea what this feels like." I didn't say anything after that. What could I say? She had been carrying this invisible weight for weeks, desperate for male attention, trying everything she could to attract the guys in our classes. But nothing worked, or at least not the way she wanted. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. Vivian burst through the door, breathless and glowing, skipping like a child. "You're not going to believe this," she cried. "Someone sent me a Valentine." I blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, seriously? From who?" She shook her head, eyes wide and gleaming. "I don't know." That struck me as odd. She sat on the bed, practically vibrating with excitement, and pulled a small folded note out of her tote bag. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. The message was short and simple. "You're mine," written in neat handwriting, adorned with a red heart and an arrow piercing through it. Vivian blushed. "It's kind of cute, right?" I forced a smile, trying not to let my unease show. "It's sweet. But you should be careful, Viv. Valentine's Day is next week. You know how intense this time of year gets. People get weird." She waved me off like I was spoiling the fun. "You worry too much." Later that night, she came to me again, giddy as ever. They left another note, in my bag this time. This one came with a single red rose and a note full of romantic intention. She was completely enchanted. Me? I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to spiral out of control. I knew how obsessed she could get, how quickly her imagination could run wild. I warned her again, gently, but she was so swept up in the mystery that she didn't really hear me. Every day leading up to Valentine's, she got more messages, each one more elaborate than the last. Flowers, notes, little candies. It was a whole performance. I tried reasoning with her, even pleaded a little. "Viv, this could be dangerous. You don't even know who this person is." She just laughed and said, "You're being dramatic." 2 days before Valentine's Day, I gave up trying. "Do whatever you want," I told her. "Just, please be careful." Honestly, I still didn't know who this person was, and I didn't want to ruin her happiness. But something about it felt off. Meanwhile, Dave and I had made plans for our own date. When I mentioned to Vivian that I was heading out to shop for Valentine stuff, she practically jumped up. "I'm coming with you. I need a special dress for my admirer." I sighed. "Fine, just don't max out your card again." That evening, we came home with our bags full of treats and dresses. Sitting on the front step was a bouquet of orange roses. Vivian squealed in delight and scooped them up before I could even react. "Look, they're beautiful." I eyed the bouquet. I didn't like the color. Orange felt strange, not romantic, ominous somehow. But she looked so happy I couldn't bring myself to say anything. The next morning she was jittery, barely able to focus on anything. She kept daydreaming about who her admirer might be. "You should just ignore him and move on with your life," I said gently. "There are safer ways to meet people." Her face twisted like I'd insulted her. "God, why do you always have to be like this?" That evening, as I was getting ready for my own date, she came running into the room, her phone in hand, eyes wide. "I got it. The address. I'm finally going to meet him." I froze. "What? Viv, are you serious? You're really going?" "It's at this private restaurant by the beach near campus," she said, showing me the message like it was the golden ticket to happiness. "Isn't that so romantic?" I stared at her, heart sinking. None of this made sense. Why couldn't she see how dangerous it was to meet a total stranger like this? "The world's not what you think it is," I said quietly. "People can be..." She cut me off. "You just don't want me to be happy." Then we heard a knock at the door. Before I could move, she dashed to open it. When she came back, she was grinning from ear to ear, holding a single, dark, crimson rose. Something about that flower unsettled me. The deep red bled into black near the edges, like it was bruised or rotting. I swallowed my worry and kept silent. She showed me the address again, repeating it like it was a song. The beach, the private restaurant. She was ecstatic, already picturing the candlelight and violins. And then she left, smiling, dreaming, floating on hope. A little while later, I got a call from Dave. His voice was tight with concern. "I'll be about 30 minutes late," he said. "But listen, those flowers, they mean something." I didn't understand at first. He continued, "The lavender rose, love at first sight. Red means true love. Orange, that's desire and obsession." His voice dropped, becoming more serious. "But that last one, the dark crimson rose, that one means death." A chill climbed up my spine like icy fingers wrapping around my neck. "You have to send me the address of that place," he said quickly. "I'm not trying to scare you, but something isn't right, I can feel it. That rose, and then nothing." The call dropped. No static, no click, just silence. Panic bloomed in my chest. I stood frozen for a second, staring at my phone like it might light up again. But it didn't. I bolted down the stairs and grabbed my scooter keys, trying Vivan's number over and over. No answer. Voicemail. Disconnected. Her phone was off, or worse. All I had was the address she'd given earlier, some private beach restaurant near the university. Only when I started driving did I realize it was practically on the other side of town. I twisted through dark streets, hands slick on the handlebars, the wind clawing at my jacket. 20 minutes later, I reached it. Or, I thought I had. The place wasn't a restaurant. It was a massive walled mansion, looming and silent, sitting at the edge of the beach like a sleeping beast. I noticed security cameras positioned above the entrance, lenses glinting in the moonlight. A small bell was embedded near the gate. Without thinking, I pressed it. The door clicked open instantly. Something about how quickly it opened set every alarm in my body off. I hesitated only long enough to shoot Dave a text. "I'm here, at the mansion, not a restaurant." Then I slid the phone into my pocket and stepped inside. The air felt thick, heavier somehow. I took a few steps past the threshold and paused, sensing something. A presence. A shadow clinging to me. But I shook it off. I was here for Vivan. Whatever was going on, I needed to make sure she was okay. As I moved further inside, a voice made me jump. "What do you want?" the man asked, stepping out from the shadows of the hallway. His eyes were cold and unreadable. I'm a friend of Vivan's," I stammered. "She told me she'd be meeting someone here. I'm just checking on her." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. "I'm her date. The secret admirer." That smile made my skin crawl. Something about it didn't fit his eyes. "She's fine," he added, voice calm. "You don't need to worry. I wasn't reassured. Can I see her?" I asked, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. He nodded slowly and motioned for me to follow. We passed through a long hallway into a candle-lit dining room. There she was. Vivan sat at a table, calmly eating, dressed in her new red dress. She looked up and smiled. "Hey," she said cheerfully. No surprise, no confusion, just eerie calm. I sat across from her, frowning. "Why haven't you answered your phone? I've been calling." She giggled. "Relax, I just wanted one night to myself." Something in her laugh was off, forced, hollow. I looked at the man, then back at her. "Okay, well, maybe I should leave," I said cautiously. But the man stepped in front of me. "Stay, at least for a drink." He handed me a glass of tropical juice. I took a sip, trying to stay polite, but the uneasiness in my stomach only deepened. Within minutes, the room spun. Then, blackness. I woke up in a pitch-dark room. My wrists were bound, a rough gag jammed in my mouth. Panic hit instantly. I thrashed, the ropes biting into my skin. The lights snapped on, blinding me. Footsteps echoed. I opened one eye, squinting through the light. It was him. The man. He was humming, a slow, haunting melody that made my blood run cold. I spotted Vivane seated at a small table across the room, a wine glass in her hand, a bouquet of dark crimson roses next to her, and her face. God, her face. She was smiling, but it wasn't a real smile. It was frozen, rigid. Her skin looked pale, waxy, and wrong. Her eyes were wide, glassy, and staring at nothing. My stomach dropped. I started crying, the gag catching the sobs in my throat. She was dead, and she'd been dead for some time. The man turned toward me, eyes glittering. I shut mine tight, thinking, this is it. This is how I die, on freaking Valentine's Day. Then, ding-dong, the doorbell. He paused. Something in his demeanor changed. He walked out of the room. I took my chance. The ropes, thank God, weren't tied tightly. I wiggled one hand free, then the other. My legs were useless, shaking uncontrollably, but I forced myself up and staggered forward. I glanced one last time at Vivane. She sat stiff and still, her smile locked in place, her eyes dull. I couldn't hold back the sobs. She wasn't Vivane anymore. I stumbled into the hallway and ran straight into Dave, and behind him, a police officer. They'd gotten my text. They'd come. The man, Damon Perron, as we later found out, was arrested without incident. No struggle, just silence, like he'd already gotten what he wanted. Vivane was pronounced dead at the scene, poisoned. They said her wine had been laced. She was his fourth victim. He targeted college girls every Valentine's Day. Each one received the same flowers, the same notes, the same promise of love. I couldn't stop thinking. I should have done more. Should have forced her to listen. Should have stopped her from going. I survived. But I left part of myself behind in that house. And every Valentine's Day since, I feel the weight of her absence, and the echo of a frozen smile that never really fades. My cousin Samantha set me up with her friend Bob. Honestly, I wasn't in the right headspace to meet anyone new. I had just come out of a toxic relationship, the kind that leaves you doubting yourself and second-guessing everything. I needed time, not another man. On top of that, Samantha didn't exactly have a great track record when it came to her own love life. I didn't trust her taste, but she was persistent, assuring me that Bob and I had a lot in common. She sounded so confident, so hopeful that I eventually gave in, more to stop her nagging than anything else. We planned to meet for dinner. I remember walking into the restaurant and being genuinely taken aback. Bob was handsome, charming even. He stood up when I approached, smiled in a way that made me feel instantly at ease, and the conversation flowed almost effortlessly. We talked about movies, books, even favorite childhood memories. It was uncanny how much we had in common. He liked the same obscure horror films I did, even quoted lines from books I thought no one else had read. It was perfect. Too perfect. That's when something started to feel off. It was subtle at first, but the more he spoke, the more it felt rehearsed, like he'd studied me, like he already knew what to say, what I wanted to hear. The coincidences piled up, and I started to feel like I was part of a script rather than a real date. Still, I smiled through dessert, thanked him for the evening, and told him I'd call. He gave a slight nod, but I could see it in his eyes. He knew I wouldn't. On the way home, Samantha called. "So, how was it?" she asked, her voice full of expectation. I hesitated. Honestly, it was weird. He seemed too perfect, like he already knew everything about me. "Did you tell him stuff about me?" There was a pause on the line. Then, her tone shifted, tight, anxious. "No, I mean, not really. Just a few things. He's just a good guy. You're overthinking it." "Sam," I said slowly, "why are you so eager for me to date this guy? What's going on?" She didn't answer directly, just kept repeating variations of, "He's perfect for you." You'd be so good together. Give him another chance." Her voice cracked, and for a second, I thought she might cry. That's when alarm bells started going off. Her desperation didn't feel like hopefulness anymore, it felt like fear. Something was wrong. Without even fully deciding to, I turned my car around and headed toward Bob's house. I needed answers. When I got there, I noticed an extra car parked in the driveway. It wasn't there earlier. My stomach knotted. Had Bob come straight home after our date? Who was already there? I parked a little way down the street and crept up the side of the house, keeping low and quiet. A light was on in what looked like the living room, and I edged toward the window, heart thudding. What I saw made my blood run cold. Through the window, I saw Samantha. She was inside, with Bob. Her face was pale and wet with tears, her shoulders hunched as if she was trying to make herself small. Bob was shouting at her, his face red, eyes wild. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard the venom in his voice. "You promised she'd want to be with me." Samantha sobbed harder, tried to speak, but he cut her off. Then in one swift, horrifying motion, he shoved her hard against the wall. Her head hit it with a dull thud. I saw the terror in her eyes and something in me snapped. I sprinted to the front door, my hands trembling as I turned the knob. It was unlocked. I burst in, my eyes locking with Samantha's first. Relief flooded her face for a split second. Then Bob turned. He looked at me like I had just betrayed him. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowed. "Why didn't you like it?" he asked, voice low and angry, stepping toward me. "Why didn't you want me?" I froze, caught between fear and fury. Everything in me screamed to protect Samantha, but I had no idea what Bob was capable of next. I wasn't about to explain myself to him. I didn't owe him anything. He was the one mistreating my cousin. As he stepped closer, reaching into his pocket, my heart jumped. I braced myself, convinced he was pulling out a weapon. But instead, he drew out a delicate gold necklace. He held it up like a peace offering. "It's for you," he said softly, almost sweetly, as though none of what had just happened had really happened. I stared at the necklace, then at him. My instinct screamed at me to back away. I didn't want his gift. I didn't want anything from him. He kept moving closer, arm extended, but I stepped around him, trying to get to Samantha. "I'm sorry," I said firmly, my voice shaking, "but I don't want your necklace." His expression darkened. In a sudden, violent motion, he hurled the necklace across the room. It clattered against the wall, the chain snapping midair. His eyes were burning with rage, but now that fury wasn't aimed at me. It was focused entirely on Samantha, as if just she was responsible for everything that had gone wrong. "Just tell me what's going on," I said, turning to Samantha. She looked stricken, her lips trembling, too afraid to speak. Her eyes flicked between me and Bob like a trapped animal looking for an exit. Bob, on the other hand, smiled, almost smugly. "I helped your cousin with a little problem," he said, voice calm but chilling. "And she promised me something in return. A date. With you." I turned to Samantha, needing her to say something, anything. "Is that true?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just lowered her head. Her silence said everything. I felt sick, betrayed, and more than anything, terrified. I stepped toward Bob, trying to usher him toward the door. "You need to leave. Now." But he didn't budge. Instead, he smiled again, the kind of smile that made my stomach churn. "If you throw me out," he said coolly, "I'll go straight to the police and tell them what she did to her ex." Behind me, I heard Samantha stifle a sob. Bob's gaze bored into mine. "But I won't. I won't say a word if you come home with me, right now." There was a beat of silence before I found my voice. "Absolutely not." That answer didn't go over well. His expression tightened, jaw clenching, and then he pulled out his phone. "Fine, I'll make the call." I froze. I knew about Samantha's ex. He disappeared without a trace months ago, and now, hearing Bob say that, paired with the look of panic on Samantha's face, I understood. They'd done something. Something irreversible. But before he could dial, everything spiraled. In one violent, impulsive moment, whether from fear or rage or something deeper, Samantha grabbed a glass bottle off the table. Her hands were shaking so badly I thought she'd drop it. But then, with a scream I'll never forget, she lunged at Bob and slashed his throat. There was a beat of silence. Then chaos. The phone dropped from his hands. He clutched his neck, eyes wide in disbelief. Blood poured through his fingers, fast and unstoppable. He gurgled something I couldn't understand before collapsing to the floor. Dead. I stood frozen, staring at the body, unable to move or speak. My mind refused to process what had just happened. The room smelled like metal and panic and finality. Samantha bent down slowly, picked up Bob's phone, and with a terrifying calmness, dialed the police. "I just killed someone," she said. "Please come quickly." When they arrived, everything felt like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. She didn't resist. She confessed not only to what had just happened, but also to what she'd done to her ex. It turned out that on both occasions, she'd suffered what the courts called a dissociative breakdown, a result of prolonged abuse. She was convicted for both crimes, but her sentence was reduced. Her confession and the psychological evaluation showed she hadn't acted out of cold calculation, but out of desperation and fear. Even now I carry the guilt. I wonder what might have changed if I'd just called the police instead of going to that house. If I'd stayed out of it. If I'd done more. But it's done. The past can't be rewritten. I just hope, when Samantha finally walks out of prison, she has a chance to start over. To heal. To find some kind of peace in the aftermath of all this darkness. Have you ever stood at the edge of a cliff and seriously wondered if jumping was your only way out? Maybe not. Most people haven't. But I have. And believe me, it's not some poetic metaphor. It's raw, terrifying, and very, very real. Let me take you back. I was just 18 then, barely an adult, stuck in a relationship with a boy who, in hindsight, was nothing but cruel, abusive. But back then, I convinced myself he loved me. I clung to the hope that he'd change, that somehow my loyalty would fix everything. So I stayed. Our relationship was a mess. We were both addicted to drugs. I used to think that made our love deep and tragic, like we were broken but bound together by some twisted fate. In truth, we were just drowning in a toxic loop of dependence, mistaking chaos for connection. He had a vicious temper, irrational, wild. His jealousy was suffocating. He never trusted me. The smallest things would set him off, and when he exploded, it wasn't just with words. He lashed out with his hands too. Those moments were always a blur of fear and shame. I was spiraling into depression, pushing everyone away, my friends, my family. Eventually they stopped trying, and honestly I understood. He was so possessive it was like he needed to control my every breath. At night, while I slept, he'd go through my phone. He grilled me constantly about work, friends, even strangers who might have glanced at me. And if I didn't respond to his texts immediately, he'd lose it, completely. I remember working in a place with terrible reception. Each time a message failed to send, I'd panic, knowing the fury that would follow. He'd accuse me of things I hadn't even imagined. His words cut deeper than any wound. Ugly, stupid, worthless. He made me believe no one would ever love me the way he did, that I was nothing without him. One afternoon in the park, everything cracked. He suddenly began hurting himself right in front of me, slashing his own arm while staring at me, daring me to react. I froze, heart thundering in my chest. I didn't understand. Was it a cry for help? A threat? I was terrified and told him I was calling an ambulance. But as soon as I pulled out my phone, he bolted. Just ran. My hands shook as I called emergency services. When the police and medics arrived, I gave them the last address I had for him, but they brushed it off, said they couldn't do much. Probably just a scare, one of them said with a shrug. Later that night he called me. I picked up, relief flooding me, until I heard his voice. He was screaming, raging at me. "Why the hell did you call the police?" he shouted. I was sobbing, stammering, trying to tell him I was scared, that I only called for an ambulance. I didn't know the cops would show up too. "I was trying to help you," I cried, chest heaving. "Please, just tell me where you are." After a tense pause, his voice softened, just a little. He told me he was on the rooftop of a building, then rattled off an address. I didn't even think. I just ran. The streets blurred as fear and adrenaline pulsed through me. My mind raced with every possibility. Was he going to hurt himself again? Or was he luring me into something worse? 2 hours later, I found myself standing in front of that building. My boyfriend was somewhere up there, waiting. I made my way up the stairs of the building, every step heavier than the last. Morning light had already filled the sky, but everything around me still felt wrong. Off balance, like waking from a nightmare only to find it waiting in the daylight. I found him on the rooftop, sitting there like nothing had happened, calm, almost cheerful. It was surreal. He greeted me like we were old friends meeting for coffee. No trace of last night's chaos, no hint of the fury he'd unleashed on the phone. At first, I didn't even know what we were talking about. We exchanged words, small ones, tense but civil, and for a moment I was stunned by the quiet. No yelling, no accusations, just words. But then as quickly as that fragile peace came, it shattered. I turned to look away for a second, and that's when he attacked. From behind, the force of his weight crashing onto me knocked the air from my lungs. His knees dug into my shoulders, pinning me hard against the rooftop. He grabbed my arms, fingers like steel. I looked up and saw his eyes, and something inside me froze. They weren't his eyes anymore. They were wild, deranged, filled with fury and something darker. Then the first slap landed. My head snapped to the side. Another came, then another. My vision blurred. Pain bloomed instantly around my eye. He screamed at me, spit flying, words slurred by rage. I couldn't make sense of it. He accused me of cheating, of lying, of things I hadn't done, things I hadn't even thought of doing. And then he started punching my legs. Hard. Over and over. Each blow made me feel more trapped, more powerless. I honestly thought he was going to kill me and walk away without a second thought. I broke down. In tears, choking on fear and pain, I begged, "If you really love me, why are you doing this to me? I haven't done anything. Please, please stop." Something flickered in his face. His eyes, just for a second, softened. He let go and stepped back, mumbling apologies. It was like watching a switch flip. But I knew better than to trust that moment. As soon as he turned his back, I acted. I ran. Straight for the edge of the rooftop. I didn't think. I jumped. The fall felt like it lasted forever and no time at all. I hit the ground hard, an alleyway below breaking my fall in the worst way. The pain was instant and unbearable. My spine, my legs. I couldn't move right. Couldn't breathe. I didn't know if I'd broken my back or shattered my feet, but I knew one thing. I had to keep him away. I heard his voice, panicked now, screaming my name from above. And then the thundering steps as he ran down to find me. I lay there, broken, fighting against the haze closing in around me. I started screaming, loud, over and over, not just in pain, but in warning. "Stay away, I tried to kill myself. I'll do it again if you come near me." That's when I saw someone, a guy across the street, standing frozen on the sidewalk. I shouted at him, "Call the police, please." I think he did. Everything after that was a blur. I remember sirens, people, hands lifting me, pain shooting through my body. And I remember seeing my ex, grabbing my bag and running off while they put me on the stretcher. The police caught him a few hours later. I heard he resisted, put up a real fight before they got him into cuffs. Now, years later, I look back and it feels unreal, like something out of a horror film. But it happened. I lived it. And somehow, I survived. I thank God every day that I jumped, that I took that terrifying leap into the unknown, because that's when everything began to change. I've been clean for years now. I got my friends and family back. And today, I'm married to a kind, gentle man who would never raise his voice, let alone a hand, against me. We have kids, a home, a life full of peace. If you're in an abusive relationship, please, please, get out. Even if the only way out feels like a leap into darkness. You are worth so much more than the pain you're being made to carry. There are people out there who will love you the way you deserve to be loved. You are worth your weight in gold. Let go of the fear. Reach for the light. I remember that day as vividly as if it had just happened. My legs were numb, completely lifeless beneath me, and every joint in my body ached from being hunched over in a space barely large enough to breathe. I was curled up tight, wedged between cold metal walls that pressed against me like a vice. Every breath felt shallow, strangled by panic, like the air itself was tightening around my lungs. I tried to think, to pull my thoughts into some kind of order. What had happened? Just an hour ago, maybe less, I was dancing on a yacht under a sky full of stars, the ocean calm, the breeze just right. Sarah was there, laughing, spinning in my arms as music wrapped around us like a dream. The kind of night that felt like it would never end. And then, it did. The memory cut off like a film reel snapping. Now I felt displaced, like I'd woken up inside someone else's nightmare. Everything warm and passionate from earlier, the way Sarah had looked at me, the heat of our shared joy, was gone, sucked into some black hole of dread. The yacht drifted gently, rhythmically, but there was nothing soothing in its motion anymore. It just rocked like a cradle holding something broken. I was shaking, soaked in sweat that smelled sour and raw, my own fear making the air feel rancid. Then I heard them, footsteps, heavy, deliberate, getting closer. I held my breath and blinked into the dark, trying to see past the shadows. My lips moved silently in a half-formed prayer, not sure who I was praying to, just desperate for those footsteps to keep going. But they didn't. They stopped, right above me. Whoever it was stood there, breathing heavily with a low sound in their throat that wasn't quite human. A growl. My heart slammed in my chest. He was hunting. And somehow I'd become the prey. How the hell did it come to this? Only an hour ago I'd felt freer than I had in years. Now I was caged in fear. A sharp clang echoed through the hull, something metallic hitting the side of the yacht. And I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut as if that would keep the fear out. But nothing could. It had already settled inside me, digging deep. I remembered the first gunshot, distant, muted by the ocean, like thunder that didn't belong. I had been holding Sarah then, her head against my chest. We thought we were alone out here, away from the world. We'd rented the yacht just for that. Just for us. No one to judge, no one to interrupt. It was supposed to be magic. A bold leap into the unknown. But now we were stranded in a nightmare we hadn't seen coming. The distance from the shore suddenly felt like a death sentence. My forehead dripped sweat that landed cold on my shirt, and my stomach growled so loudly I could have screamed. I pressed my hands against it, panicked that even that sound might give me away. "I know you're there, Marco. Come out," a voice said from above, each word a dagger to my spine. Then came the laughter, hollow and broken. It cracked through the silence like glass shattering in a silent room. Marco? That wasn't my name. My heart thudded so loudly I was afraid he could hear it. I didn't dare make a sound. Could he really have the wrong person? Or was this all part of some twisted game? I clenched my jaw, thinking of Sarah. Was she okay? Had I abandoned her in the chaos? My stomach churned with guilt, acid rising in my throat. Coward. That's what I felt like. How did it come to this? A few hours ago, we were writing the first pages of a love story. Now it felt like some stranger had torn them up and replaced them with a horror script we were never meant to be in. And I still didn't know how it would end. I stood there, trembling, every nerve in my body screaming with tension. I expected the worst, expected him to find me, to end it all. He moved across the yacht like a predator, slow and methodical, his footsteps thudding against the deck, each one sending shockwaves through my chest. He was searching, pacing from one side to the other, frantic, like something inside him was unraveling. Then suddenly, he leapt into the sea. But I never heard a splash. "Please, Jenny," I heard him say, his voice cracking, raw, desperate. For the first time since he'd stormed aboard, there was emotion in his voice. Not rage, not madness, something almost human. And that somehow made it worse. My chest tightened painfully. It felt like my muscles were twisting in on themselves, as if my very heart was trying to retreat. The fear was so thick it tasted metallic in my mouth. How had we come to this? I knew he'd had enemies. Jenny had told me bits and pieces, but none of them should have known where we were. Not out here. Not in the middle of the open sea, alone and vulnerable. But he had found us, and he was armed. A machete. A gun. The images my brain conjured were grotesque and uncontrollable. I'd never really thought about what it looked like, what it felt like, when death was close enough to touch. Now it hovered over me like a shadow I couldn't shake, pressing down on me from all sides. My eyes burned. I couldn't stop the tears. I thought of Jenny, my Jenny, and the sheer helplessness crashed over me like a wave. I had failed her. I hadn't protected her. I was just a pathetic shape curled up in the corner of the yacht, drenched in sweat, clinging to my own body heat as if that would make a difference. Nothing else mattered. This was it. That thought repeated in my head. This is it. Just as he called her name again. Jenny. I froze, instinct shutting everything else down. If he found me now, I was dead. There was no doubt in my mind. He didn't come here to talk. He came to destroy. The air reeked. Sea salt mingled with something sickly sweet, something decaying. It hit me hard, and my stomach twisted violently. I tried to hold it in, but bile rose and spilled out, hot and sour, splashing on my clothes. "How could you betray me?" he screamed, his voice distorted by anguish. "All I ever did was love you." Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. I doubled over, everything collapsing inside me. "Please, please, Martin." Jenny's voice trembling, pleading, but it was too late. When he said his name, something in me shattered. Martin. I knew then there was no coming back from this. The gunshot tore through the night, sharp, final. And just like that, Jenny's voice was gone. I slapped both hands over my mouth, shaking violently, trying to keep even the tiniest sound from escaping. Every part of me screamed to move, to run, but I stayed frozen. The pain in my chest, the broken sound of my heartbeat, none of it mattered. Jenny was gone. I wanted to collapse, to scream, but survival was stronger than grief. I had to move. Even as my mind spun in chaos, I knew I had to try. I had to run. My legs felt like stone, tingling with electric pain as I forced them to uncoil beneath me. I stumbled forward, desperate, disoriented. But the second I stood, my knees buckled. I collapsed hard on the deck. And that's when I saw him. Martin. He was on the floor, his head resting gently on Jenny's stomach. He had shot her, and then himself. The scene was too surreal, too grotesquely tender to register. It didn't make sense, nothing did anymore. My brain couldn't keep up. My body was shaking, my mouth dry, my vision blurred with salt and sweat and tears. It was over, and I was still here. What followed is a haze. I don't remember getting back to the port, just flashes of lights, voices shouting, the rocking of the boat. Everything felt distant, as if it were happening to someone else. When I finally reached Puerto, I was bombarded with questions. A blur of uniformed officers, notebooks, recording devices. I barely spoke. I didn't need to. The yacht's onboard security cameras had caught everything. They saw what I couldn't explain. The moment Martin somehow boarded without us noticing, how he brought death aboard with him. That tiny oversight, just one moment of unawareness, was all it took. It cost Jenny her life. It stole the future we had dreamed about. And it left me alone in the wreckage, clutching nothing but memories that now felt more like ghosts. I was so nervous I could barely breathe, let alone feel the soft touch of his breath on my cheek. The night should have been perfect. Valentine's Day, candlelight, love. But instead, my stomach churned with a strange tension, like I'd swallowed something rotten. It was supposed to be special. After 24 years of fleeting, hollow relationships, I finally felt genuinely seen, truly loved. Ferdinand had lit up my world in ways I hadn't imagined possible. I glanced down at the flowers he'd given me, deep crimson roses tied with a silver ribbon. I brought them to my face, inhaling their sweet perfume, letting it briefly calm the storm inside me. My heels clicked against the steps as I climbed toward my apartment, my fingers trembling so much the bouquet wobbled in my grip. Just as I reached my door, the keys slipped from my hand and scattered across the floor with a metallic jingle. Cursing softly, I bent to retrieve them. That's when I felt it, a chill that ran across my skin like an invisible hand brushing my spine. I froze, sensing a presence behind me. My heart skipped violently. I turned my head, holding my breath. But the hallway was empty. No movement, no sound. Nothing. Get a grip, I muttered under my breath, trying to shake off the unease. Ferdinand had told me he'd wait in the car, like he always did. His voice echoed in my mind, soft and reassuring as he leaned in and kissed my forehead earlier that evening. "You have to get ready, beautiful," he'd said, his green eyes glowing under the streetlights. "I made reservations at this amazing place for us." Those words had melted me. None of my exes had ever planned anything so thoughtful, let alone on Valentine's Day. He made me feel like I mattered. I smiled again at the memory, fumbling with the key and finally unlocking the door. The bolt clicked loudly, unnerving in the silence of the apartment. And there it was, my red dress laid out on the bed. It shimmered under the light, elegant and dramatic like it belonged on a red carpet. I smiled, touching the soft fabric, imagining Ferdinand's reaction when he saw me in it. With my hands still slightly damp with nerves, I walked into the bathroom to freshen up. The mirror didn't lie. I looked radiant. Love looked good on me. There was peace in my eyes, a rare kind of calm I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, I believed I was living in a dream I never wanted to wake from. But as I stepped back into the room, my smile faltered. The dress was gone. I blinked, confused, and looked around. Not only was the dress no longer on the bed, the bouquet was missing too. My chest tightened. The room hadn't been left unlocked. No one else had the key. "What the hell?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. A cold sweat ran down the back of my neck, soaking into the collar of my blouse. My fingers trembled, and I wrapped my arms around myself as if trying to hold my fear in place. The atmosphere had changed. Heaviness hung in the air like static before a storm. The room didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt wrong, off, empty, but not safe. The silence screamed at me, pressing against my ears. I thought about calling security, but my hands wouldn't move. My mind was screaming at me to act, but my body was frozen. The fear was too real, too heavy. I scanned the room again, heart hammering against my ribs, and that's when it hit me. I wasn't just alone. I was being watched, and I couldn't tell from where. There was no one there, no footsteps, no voice, no sign of life. But the feeling, thick, suffocating dread, kept crawling up my spine like a swarm of ants. Sweat began to bead on my forehead, dripping down my temple as my heart slammed against my ribs. Something was terribly wrong, and I could feel it in my bones. I turned in slow circles, scanning the apartment. Nothing looked disturbed, but everything felt abandoned. "Ferdinand!" I called out, voice breaking. Silence. Where was he? Why had the dress and the flowers vanished as if they'd never existed? I rubbed my arms, trying to fight off the chill that had settled deep in my body. The air had turned thick, viscous, hard to breathe, like every breath was a struggle through syrup. My throat was dry and a tremor started in my knees. Did I walk into something I couldn't walk back out of? Panic squeezed my chest. My mind started racing, throwing up every horrible possibility all at once. Without thinking, I stumbled toward the kitchen and yanked open the drawer with the knives. My hand wrapped around the handle of the biggest one I could find. I gripped it so tightly my knuckles went white. I held it behind me like a lifeline. If Ferdinand was playing some twisted joke, he'd never see it coming. If this was something else, I'd have something between me and the unknown. I stepped out of the room slowly, every sound amplified. The dim flashes of streetlights flickered against the walls, throwing long, jittery shadows. My breath hitched. I tiptoed toward the front door, my pulse pounding so hard it felt like it echoed off the walls. As I reached for the handle, I couldn't even swallow. Saliva stuck in my throat, choked by a knot of panic. A burning sensation sparked on my upper lip, fear boiling under my skin. I opened the door and froze. Just beyond the threshold, a man stood a few meters away. He was holding a knife. The air went still. I didn't move. I couldn't. His eyes, wild, glassy, consumed by something unhinged, locked on mine, and a slow, eerie smile spread across his face. Then he lifted his blood-stained hand and pointed directly at me. "You're not worthy of a man's love," he hissed. Time splintered. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw it. Ferdinand's body sprawled on the pavement behind him. My mouth fell open. My breath left me entirely. No. It couldn't be real. My knees buckled slightly as my brain tried and failed to process the sight. He was dead. Ferdinand was dead. The man kept talking, ranting about the union of the pure and impure needing to end. His voice twisted into something almost ritualistic. And then, God, the metallic scrape as he bent down and dragged an axe from Ferdinand's chest. The sound, that wet sliding steel, would haunt me forever. I couldn't fully grasp it, couldn't believe it, but I knew one thing. I had no time to fall apart. He was coming for me next. I didn't think. I moved. The second he stepped forward with the axe, I surged toward him, blade clenched tight in my fist. He didn't expect that. His face flickered with something. Fear? Surprise? I didn't care. I raised my knife and stabbed, once, twice, again. His neck, his chest, wherever I could reach. I screamed as I did it, tears mixing with sweat on my face. He tried to stop me, to grab my arm, but I kept going. The adrenaline was wildfire. I didn't stop until he dropped the axe and collapsed in a heap on the floor, unmoving. My chest heaved as I backed away, trembling, hands slick with blood that wasn't mine. He was still muttering, something incoherent, rasping words I couldn't understand. But I didn't care. I couldn't listen. I couldn't breathe. Because Ferdinand was gone. And I knew, with a hollow ache spreading through my chest, that no matter what I did next, no matter how many times I replayed the night, my Valentine's Day nightmare wasn't over. Not as long as he stayed out of reach.